Dynasty word association, and up is 4 divisive players coming into the 2021 fantasy season. Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty show. And Jordan, what is the first word you think of when I say Jalen Hurts?
Risky. Just a ton of risk. And I'm not sure the payoff's worth it. There's a ton of downside there. You've got potential 3 first-round picks on the back end of this year. If he's not the guy, it's without a great supporting cast, without an established coaching staff. I mean, this isn't set up for success. He was way below expectation. He was underperforming in terms of all of the passing metrics last year, but he escaped with a QB7 finish in the 4 weeks that he was a starter. That's a very risky profile. What about you?
Risky. My word association with Jalen Hurts is redraft. That he is a 1-year play. I am saying redraft because you know what? You absolutely could be right with Jalen Hurts from the prism of 2021 in your lineup. What is he doing for you? I don't think there's a ton of depth chart pressure if things don't go well. I think they're going to give him a decent leash here. He's going to run around. He's going to make some plays. He may be one of the top 2 or 3 rushing points guys from the position at quarterback for fantasy. However, like you mentioned, the long-term leash, the 2022 starter odds, I don't like those. And I don't like the price here in the top 15 or so of the position and cost. You can pivot around. I like moving up with him. The fact that he's going around Deshaun Watson is like the aneurysm-inducing dynasty long-term valuation conundrum here of like, this does not process or make sense. But I will admit, if he finishes in the top 5, top 8, whatever this year on a per-game basis, I would not be surprised. But that alone, I do not believe will solidify and stabilize his job standing for 2022.
Well, you just answered exactly what my question was going to be, because I was wondering how that would fit into 2022. So
it doesn't.
That's a good response, because I think if he performs exactly like he did last year, he's probably in trouble. Okay, Saquon Barkley. What
pivotal.
do you say?
Pivotal. The key word here is pivotal. He is largely viewed as one of the best, most talented, drop your jaw combinations of physical attributes. We have seen that in cross sections. He can catch 75, 100 balls. He can rival the top of the position. We want to see a little more interior wise, but if he's even, he's leaving with big plays. But yet coming back from injury, I wonder, in this really small zone that running backs have, that typically they come out. If they're going to have a running back 1 overall season, this is about the time, Barkley. So if he comes back and he's like Adrian Peterson, life is good. Everyone that was holding for top 2, 3 dynasty prices this whole time, good on you. If he doesn't, though, if he gets hurt again, if he ends up being running back 7, and what's funny is his ceiling is so high, running back 7, I think would be considered a disappointment. So if any of that happens as a 24-year-old going on 25, then I think you're going to look back and be like, well, I could have traded him last year when he got hurt for help last year, someone that potentially could have outscored him this year as well, someone a little more insulated. You had a lot of options. So we've been waiting a while for this. Maybe it'll be a few weeks into the season, but I will say pivotal is this year for Mr. Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I'm going with volatile. And I like your choice of pivotal. I think that's right there. Listen, he's starting to fall a little bit, and there's a little bit of air coming out of the balloon. We're seeing Dalvin Cook jump ahead of him. We're seeing Jonathan Taylor and spots go ahead of him. That's you're only insulated for as long as you produce, and once you stop producing, you're not insulated anymore.
Ask right? Ezekiel Elliott.
Correct, and who was wide running back 2, by the way, when Dak Prescott played last year. And look how quickly that fell. So the market reacts pretty quickly and harshly to these things. He has not received that treatment yet. He can't do that again. Right? He was basically the running back, essentially tied for the running back 1 in his rookie season. And it's been, I'm not going to say a complete disappointment. There's injuries in there, but he has not performed to expectation when he was the first overall dynasty asset. So he's very volatile, right? You could very much see running back 1 in his range of outcomes, multiple seasons over the next couple of years. That wouldn't shock. Also wouldn't shock if he's outside the top 10 in startup cost a year from now. So I do think he's got a very volatile stock here coming forward.
Yep, and he's got a volatile quarterback attached to him. I will say the weaponry around him. Not everyone's gonna be able to key on Saquon Barkley there with the Giants, so he should get a little lighter boxes. And man, you get that guy, you get that thoroughbred in the open field. Hold your breath. Hold your breath because it's fun stuff. So yeah, I'm definitely range of outcomes here with Barkley for what we could see, as you mentioned, next 2-3 seasons on how his profile plays out. And this is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 61 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Do want to remind you to sign up for that Football Guys daily email. Some of the things from this past week include things like we actually own him, Jordan, in Jacob Hollister. Could be a threat to Dawson Knox there in Buffalo. Hollister's got a little bit of a profile, underrated one for those 2 tight end leagues. Don't want to miss information like Michael Strachan off to a good start. The Colts, who's their wide receiver 1? How does that depth chart and pecking order play out? And then you get links to all the new articles on the site. I wanted to we'll shout out Jordan's here in a second later in the show, but my running back role matrix is out, looking at all the depth charts. Wide receiver role matrix is going to be coming out in the next week or so as well. All that is through signing up and just getting on the list every single day for about, I think it's about 10 and a half months a year. You get that email update delivered by Joe Bryant, all the news and links you need to have your best fantasy season yet. So we've got 2 more here. And what is the first word you think of, Jordan, when I say Cole Kmet?
Middling. You just look at the profile. Like I liked him coming out as a dynasty cost player. And you just you ring the bell on tight end 1 in the late second, early third round of rookie drafts. That's just something you do. But these guys, the upside plays at tight end tend to be an early reveal. And you can look at some of the efficiency metrics, your yards per route run, and those sorts of stats. And they give a pretty good indication on whether or not you have upside relatively early in your career. And if you blend in, that kind of looks like what your dynasty career is probably going to be. You're going to probably blend in. So I think it could be a decent floor play here going forward, but ultimately I think it's a middling impact. And that's my word for him.
Similar vein that I went with, and I'm going to actually utilize the hyphen to make it a one word here, which I wrote start 2. Meaning, I think he has a lot more 2 tight end format appeal here than start 1. And that applies directly to what you said about floor. Floor matters a lot in 2 tight end leagues. I mean, yeah, the studs are still studs, but you start lowering that baseline. And with Kmet, Jimmy Graham's still there. I'm not sure how long, but that's a committee. That's a committee, and Jimmy Graham does not help Kmet. I do wonder with Kmet, a lot of times those elite tight ends, and I don't think Kmet's going to get there. He's a solid guy, but they're typically some of the better athletes. Kmet's an okay athlete. You want to kind of squint your way and say he's some iteration of, say, Mark Andrews. Andrews is an average athlete, and he's been optimized. He's been the wide receiver 1 for his team. That's kind of, I think, what it's going to take for him to get to mid tight end 1 land and really matter much in terms of traditional 1 tight end formats.
Yeah, I love that. All right, when I say Evan Ingram, what do you say?
Pedigreed. I think we're talking about round 1 tight ends, and sure, there's guys like OJ Howard, David Njoku especially, that are round 1 guys that have really hit a rough patch, and dynasty wise, they're pretty affordable for the profile. Now, Evan Ingram, he's coming off a pretty good target year. Now, the touchdowns, the efficiency, running 3-yard stick routes, like all this is quizzical stuff. I can't wait for him to get out of the Giants. And I think if he's coming off his worst year, but he was top 8 3 years in a row, high level track on a per game basis the first 3 years. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, he misses a ton of time. Well, that's why I said per game. Like when he plays, here's how he's been looking. And a lot of times, you see a guy that like him, he's produced. It's gone under the radar. I know there's some warts there with his profile coming off a not great year. They add to the passing game. I'm not a big fan of Daniel Jones. All this to say 2022 plus, I think we're looking at a profile that you want to have shares. Is now the time to buy? Is it in season? Is it December? That there are going to be opportunities here, but the main thing is pedigree, both with per game and round 1.
Most rostered. My most rostered tight end.
Learn something about Jordan every day.
and aggravating, I guess, would be the other one, just because I thought he had elite wide receiver in his range of outcomes, hasn't quite reached that yet. I still have hope as per the highly rostered number there. But yeah, he's definitely one that I think there's better days to come, and I kind of wish it was. And this is the problem with tight ends. This is the thing with Pitts that I give some caution to, is it's hard for tight ends to make a transition to the NFL. It just is. And it's probably outside of quarterback the most difficult position to translate to get a good role in. It's just very difficult. It can be very difficult to put those guys in the right spots. And that would sort of be a caution on these tight end prospects going forward. That even though they can be really good, it can be really tough to sort of optimize them for NFL offenses. So that's cautionary tale.
Since I have it up, I wanted to do a dramatic reading of some of the greatest we've seen over the past 20 plus years at tight end and what they did year one. Tony Gonzalez, pretty good, right? 16 tight end 1 seasons. Guess which one wasn't? First year, tight end 18. Jason Witten, pretty nice player. I think he turned out okay. Wide receiver, tight end 21. Antonio Gates, tight end 23. Gronkowski even, tight end 15. Jimmy Graham, tight end 29. Kelsey, he was basically a non-factor. I think he was hurt for him, but pretty much the only guy. Jeremy Shockey came in right away. He was a stud there. Greg Olsen, he was a tight end 2 type. Jordan Reed was even a low tight end 1. The point is, it doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. Vernon Davis, he was an absolute marvel at the position, tight end 17. Took him a while. It actually took him Eric Ebron like 3-4 years to really kind of come home and find some peak years for him. So yeah, Kyle Pitts is going to be pretty interesting. No word association for him, but yeah, he's going to be one that I really, of like 5-10 players, it's like I want to see how the market reacts to what Pitts does, or what does he need to do for people to justify having him as tight end 1 in December, January. Maybe not much. Maybe not much. They just won't move.
Get out of bed.
They already have them there. Yeah, they just won't move them. Do want to remind you, this is episode 61 with Jordan McNamara, myself, Chad Parsons, and the Football Guys mobile app is back for 2021. Custom projections to dominate your waiver wire, the trades, syncing your roster, all from your mobile devices. It's on the Apple, Google Play stores. So you want to get that when we get to drafting season. I always want to say it's wedding season, but it's fantasy season. It's drafting season here. So whatever device you have, you want to get it. It's customized. It fits perfectly on your phone. It looks beautiful. They've done a ton of work on it every single year, and you can just rev that up again for 2021. Let's get to some dynasty trades, shall we? And it seems like we talk every week, but I always put different twists on it. On the, big time players, do you get enough? We got a couple of those with George Kittle coming up in a second. But first, start one. And we got Patrick Mahomes traded for a couple of firsts and then some. So how much difference? And Jordan is always the marketplace for Mahomes. Did you get enough? Sort of the litmus test here. 110, a 22 first, and then two seconds next year for Patrick Mahomes in that one quarterback format.
It's amazing because it feels like you should get a lot more, but the amount of buyers that you're going to have for Mahomes and start
for a quarterback, yeah,
it's just not much. And we've done.
You sit there with Dak. You sit there with Allen. Are you really, 3-4 Lamar Jackson? Are you really are those going to be buyers on Mahomes?
Right. And we fall in this trap a little bit too. I think in the later in Superflex, like anyone that's got quarterback 24, 22, something like that, they're not going to trade for quarterback 16 thinking it's an upgrade. They're just not going to pay that. And so it's a similar thing for a guy like Mahomes when the position's pretty deep and you go all the way down to the Lawrence owner, the Burrow GM, right? All these guys, like they're going to think that they got a guy. Where it doesn't, like 110 in a future first in a couple seconds doesn't feel right, but that probably feels like in a market where it's an illiquid market, like it's probably not that bad, to be honest with you.
And let's ask this. I mean, let's say you're rocking, not one of the top 4, 5, 6 consensus sort of guys, but what if you're sitting there and you're like, well, I got, Matt Ryan and Ryan Tannehill. Like, so you got 2 guys that you're like, I've been playing matchups last year. I feel pretty good about this. So do I want to give 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Mahomes? The answer may be no. Like now I have 3 quarterbacks, and now we've talked about it before. Now you got 3 quarterbacks where you say, well, I'm not dropping one. It's 24-man rosters. Like, what am I doing here? Now I got to use a roster spot as part of the calculus here.
Yeah, one thing too on a warp basis, right? If you're sort of looking warp wise, I mean, he basically needs to be like the picks are going to probably produce him in terms of just raw warp. And he's going to basically need to be elite high end finisher 3-4 years straight for the picks to lose in this deal. What you do with the picks is a different story, but it's really tough in start one to run that up. And we just don't really see that string. Like we could love him in Superflex because he's long-term, really high floor, but have multiple years of super high-end ceiling. That can be really, really tough.
And can't you pay, like in general, I got lucky in one league where a team was loaded at quarterback and I paid 2/3 and something else for Aaron Rodgers in season. They were looking, and again, because there's no buyers, and I was able to leverage that. But can't you find top 10, top 12 production in season for like a second? Even if it's like, a profiled guy. I mean, if someone's backup quarterback can garner a second and maybe a something else, I mean, that's tough to say no to when it's like, I'm rocking Mahomes. Like, why wouldn't I sell you Stafford for, a second and something?
Right.
Even though he's a top 10 guy.
Seconds for Rodgers and Watson. Stack them together.
Right. And I was actually thinking about that. What if you had Watson? Like, that was your go-to guy. You only have one or two quarterbacks, and he's glaringly. But now it's like, if you pay this for Mahomes, I mean, you're covered for now. But if Watson comes back, you're going to be in the same situation of, well, now I got two guys. Now I've got to try to trade one maybe to optimize my roster and really leverage studs. So, yeah, it's a tough situation. It really is a completely different super flex 2 QB versus one quarterback animal here. All right, we've got Odell Beckham in a one quarterback for Jalen Reagor and a 23 second. So you've got an a dropping first rounder from a year ago, but then you've got a couple year little swoon here from Odell Beckham, previously quasi untouchable.
What do you see as a ceiling for Odell Beckham Jr.? Like a best case scenario, what do you see as a seasonal finish?
Yeah, I think he could get into the top 15 or 16 in a perfect case. Can he get higher than, say, wide receiver 7 or 8? Probably not. Yeah, but perfect storm it. Yeah.
It's going to take a lot, I think, for him to get there just based on their offense. And I was running some numbers on their offense. Like, it's going to be a huge haul. Like, they're going to, and I actually think that they could. Everyone's making them out to be this darling. Like, they're the variance kings from last year. Like, they were like 3 wins better than expectation last year. So I expect regression, and I think that could be favorable for a little bit more passing. But even still, like, I was trying to like force feed in Odell Beckham into like a top 10 type projection. And I was like, man, it's really hard to do. So
Landry, all those tight ends. Yeah.
Right,
and then you got low volume.
Right. And then he's got a really cuttable contract after this year. And you sort of wonder what, then he's going to be bouncing around. You sort of wonder what that brings.
Probably good news. To be fair, I would if I have him, I would 2022 different uniform. I'd actually be rooting for that.
But on the back of 3 disappointing seasons, like it's been a while, right? It's really been a while. And this is, we could do a whole show on Odell Beckham Jr.
Such a rare case of where he was 3-4 years into his career.
And just to absolutely, it's like he's one of those cartoons where he's climbing up a ladder and then someone cuts the rungs out from him and pushes the thing away.
It's hard to have his career start and be like wide receiver 35 to 40 and valuation at 28. Like, that's tough. It's actually tough. And it pretty much takes exactly what's happened. A little bit of injury, go into a run first, run always, run preference offense where you've got Jarvis Landry there as well, and they've drafted, they got 2-3 tight ends that warrant, 40, 50 plus targets, on a skill level. So it's tough. Now again, the second Reagor is this like, let's not pretend like that side is truly insulated either. So.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's an interesting thing with, what are you sort of chasing would sort of be my thought. I mean, ultimately, I think the right answer is probably Beckham. But when you sort of look at the other side, you could say, all right, I don't think maybe the difference between Beckham and Reagor is all that much. And, I could take the pick. I think the difference is probably more. I think I would probably lean Odell Beckham Jr. If there's going to be a difference maker in this trade, it's probably Odell Beckham Jr. I just don't feel great about him at this point because I really did, because I knew the question would come in sort of the offseason. I actually spent like half a day sort of crunching numbers, trying to figure out how to make it, like, how does this happen? And I'm pretty pessimistic on his projection going forward, but I'll probably take Beckham in this trade.
I do think market-wise, this is one of those absolutely straight arrow fair deals because you're talking about someone in the wide receiver 35 or so, and then you have Reagor in the mid 40s. So you figure a second pretty much makes up that difference. Who do you think is more likely to have a top 36 season this year? Probabilities.
Oh, Odell Beckham Jr.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. And then, but obviously, I think, but even if he finishes as wide receiver 27 or something, I don't know if that really rights his ship value wise. He's still going to be a he's still going to be a roster / lineup play for you more so than, oh, now I got this liquid stuff in the market because he's going to be, 29.9 for week 1, 2022. So we know what that age does for a wide receiver, even if they have been productive, or are coming off a productive year.
Can I just add to that too? When you sort of look at what we expect out of these two guys, like they're probably going to be pretty close in value next year. So it almost makes you wonder: is the production that Beckham's going to offer you this year, is it that far above replacement level that you don't just take the pick, right? Sort of go into the higher level of this. Like, what's the difference between them? If they're going to be the same cost, can I just, if we think Beckham's going to be a wide receiver 3, do we care? Just take the pick. So that would sort of be the other angle to it. I mean, I think he has a little bit more of that in him, right? And I think that there's probably more value if he has a couple good games, like he's got the name brand residual there that could stick. But I think as the more I talk about this, the more I'm like, we'll just take the pick. And, I see it. It's very close. It's very close.
That in brass tacks of like who affected my team and by what, I mean, you might get to 23 and you're like, well, the second's like arguably the best thing in the deal, right? I mean, that's possible as well. So it's always like, and you're getting around one guy, right? That's still going to be on his rookie deal. Let's hope, fingers crossed, either Hurts works out or, they have a new quarterback during that rookie contract that points him in a different direction trajectory wise. All right. We got tight end premium 1.5 here for a 12 teamer and Mark Andrews for Deontay Johnson and Chris Carson.
So can we talk about the Deontay Johnson target number from last year?
My favorite thing about Jordan is that when I ask a direct question, it's never the answer that it starts with. It's always like some side story. But yes, absolutely. Every single time the answer is yes. Please start with something else.
Are we poo-pooing too much a wide receiver that had 140 plus targets last year? Like, are we going to look back in 6 months and be like, hey, dummy, like this guy was sitting here. He drew 150 targets. It didn't go particularly well, but he drew 140, 145, 150 targets last year. And you just sort of whistled by the graveyard on it. And all of a sudden, the variance goes back to better on him, and we're sitting here 6 months from now being like, we should have known
that Deontay Johnson was wide receiver 8 or something.
Right. That's kind of again, I think it takes kind of a lot for that to get there, but he already has the beginning of that, which is targets are a talent stat. It's really tough to get there. And an offense with Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron, I mean, he rings up a huge number of targets, and you just sort of look at that and you're like, huh. And I think he's one of those players that, as I sort of look at the numbers, I sort of go back and I'm like I might be wrong on him. And I do think Andrews.
I think you're making this pretty complicated. I think you use this as a vehicle and a diving board to be able to say that about Deontay Johnson, because I don't think it's that complicated. I mean, Mark Andrews, and I like the player. I really like the prospect coming out, but he's an absolute like lower ceiling guy in my opinion. Things are turning against him. He's been a mid tight end 1, and again 1.5. Let's not react like it's the end of the world, or it's a game changer for 1.5 for tight ends. It really isn't. Does it shift things a little bit? Yes. Does it shift it a lot? No. I mean, it's like 15-20%, like a difference at most, from whatever their valuation was to this new format. And so Deontay Johnson, I think Andrews for Deontay Johnson frankly, is fair-ish. You throw in Chris Carson, who's back. He could be a multi-year starter again with Seattle. I mean, I just think, and he's 27, not 29 and a half. I mean, this to me is a crushing two-way go for Johnson and Carson, where you're helping your team in two fronts. And I'll take my chances with what my tight end committee is, the waiver wire. I mean, I'll just go with it, because I don't think Andrews. I think he's going to fall with what they added at wide receiver. We know they like to run the ball DNA wise there, so I think he's been exploiting a woeful passing game around him, and it's changing this year.
Yeah, so your point, I think it's interesting, is that you're basically going to be low on Deontay Johnson and still take him in the side of the deal, which I think it's notable. You know, I sort of came at it from the, hey, are we too low on Deontay Johnson? You're like, I don't care. It's still Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, like you were focusing on that, and I was like, come on, just it's a flat out win here. Even if Deontay Johnson is like wide receiver 28 this year, I still think it's a win. Even if his targets drop down, like I still think Carson's going to provide enough at a position where, hey, if it's predictable, I mean, what's preventing Carson from rocking a top 12 to 15 year?
Nothing. To injuries.
Rashad Penny, injuries.
If he like plays 17 games, he'll do that.
If Rashad Penny is fully healthy, like it's still like a 60-40 mix, right?
That's generous to Rashad Penny, yeah.
That's what I'm creating a worst case here.
Right.
So yeah, durability. And yeah, durability has been a thing. But Carson on a per game basis, and again, I've been down on Carson most of his career. I'm down on both of these guys, but I'm still taking the side, like historically speaking.
And you love Mark Andrews, and you're still.
And I do as a prospect, but I can see that, like you just said it's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore what Baltimore's doing. In the offseason, listen to what they're telling us. They're beating us over the head.
Lamar Jackson's
our wide receivers stink. We need to get better. So, okay, if wide receivers are better, that's a bit of a hindrance to tight end. All right. So we got one quarterback and shallow rosters here. Eric Ebron and 104 for George Kittle. So 4, we're looking at probably Chase, Etienne, or Kyle Pitts.
Man, well, that's interesting, because Pitts could arguably be going over Kittle.
Yep.
This. How shallow rosters are we talking?
I don't know. Let's say it's 20, 18, something like that. If they say shallow, I mean,
you don't have a ton of time to develop these guys.
Yeah. Is Ebron like he's fringe roster, right? In that depth,
he's fringe roster, and it's basically Kittle for the pick. I mean, I think it's probably Kittle.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, great about it. I don't love Kittle.
I think Etienne's the answer. Like Etienne makes it to 4, a decent amount. So Pitts usually go, I mean, that could be Pitts BPA on the board.
Can you trade Etienne for Kittle in any existing league?
I guess not. But doesn't that feel weird to say that a tight end like Kittle? And what I will is I don't agree with the market where some have him tight end 1-2. I don't agree with that. He's my 4, so that's a different conversation and starting point versus the field. So,
do you have him behind Hawkinson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I for
and
Kittle,
Waller, to close the loop on that, would be Waller.
I have Pitts over him.
Oh, you have Pitts? Okay.
Yeah, I think for Kittle, he's older than a lot of people think. And like, I don't know, I see a little Gronk to him. Like, I think he's going to get banged around like the violent way he plays. We'll see. Again, I'm not predicting doom over the next 2-3 seasons, but I wouldn't be surprised either. And just like you wouldn't take on a contending team, you wouldn't take him over Kelsey. I think on a rebuilder, you wouldn't take him over Pitts. You wouldn't take him over Hawkinson either. And I think honestly, on a contender, give me Waller. So I just, where does he fit? Over Andrews. Exactly.
Yeah.
I just
don't hurt me like that, man. Don't hurt me like that. With that love over Andrews. Andrews is my guy. No, I'm with you. Now that you sort of the way you structure, is it tight end premium or is it pretty straight up in this?
It's straight up. So that's why I kind of like the 104. I mean, I don't have to be over the moon to say I have to have an elite tight end. And if Kittle, I know he's been there, he's done that, he's produced, but I'm willing to kind of massage this a little bit, and like, is there another angle to play? Obviously, we don't know what other tight end they have, but they have Ebron and somebody else. I mean, you can find some value. I think. Could you get Tyler Higbee for like a third and something, a late second? I mean, so to pretend like you can't manufacture reasonable, I can kind of pace some of the teams in my league production for far less, and you bank the 4. I don't know. I would bank the 4 personally.
I'm with you. I think as you talk through that, but I think it's notable because you could take ETN at that spot and feel good about it, and at the same point, you couldn't trade him for Kittle. So I think it's an interesting that what you care about is an interesting debate in there.
And 4 is liquid too. Let's say you really want to get Harris or ETN or something. I mean, you could trade to 1 or 2 or 3, where Kittle is a very specific asset that the team at 1 or 2 may not be interested in.
Totally fair.
And we don't even know when this draft is. I mean, what if this is late August? Some of these drafts, if it hasn't happened yet, it could be 6-8 weeks from now, and 104 could be. I mean, what if Najee Harris is dinged up? He's gonna miss the opening month, go on the pup or something. You get him at 4. So late drafts, crazy stuff happens. All right, let's get to some quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum this week. Those completed Dynasty trades. Also, there's a couple others that I peruse. I'm going to start with the longest one here. There's a little meat here. I'm going to parse through it here, Jordan. But I don't like keeping time bombs on my roster. I've had a bunch of discussions. He's specifically talking about trading Cooper Kupp. He's tried to trade him since February. And how they talk about for contending pieces or producers or older players, you want to wait till in season or just wait in general. And they're saying, I did wait, and just people aren't making in season moves, involve paying their firsts, many times in the year. There's not a lot of GMs or teams that are just going to give you a first for a contending piece. That's not, commonplace across half the league or all contenders per se. So he basically, a lot of people were ribbing that he sold low on guys like Cooper Kupp. But it's like, hey, I tried for months and months. This was the best I could get. What are your thoughts on guys like Kupp, or just hey, I don't think I'm contending, I want to reshape my team, on timing the calendar, and at some point, do you just take what you can get?
Well, I think it's, most of what we're dealing with right now is random. So I wouldn't get over the moon in terms of trying to bail right now because I'm not contending, because you're probably more towards the middle, whether you think you're a contender or whether you think you're rebuilding. You're probably closer to the middle than you'd appreciate. And if Cooper Kupp posts a top 8 finish, which isn't outside of the range of outcomes, considering who his quarterback is and what his offense is, all of a sudden he's, you're a half a win better than you expected, right? And those things add up a couple of times. And next thing you know, this 5-8 team or whatever, however many regular season games they're playing, all of a sudden is 8-5, and you're contending for a bye, right? Like, so be careful on doing that. I don't try and time the market. I think it's really tough to do. Generally, I think there's certain situations that I will say, hey, listen, this is what needs to happen for me to extract this price. And, I do that with some guys. But I think one of the problems that I have generally with people going super wide receiver heavy is this problem, because everyone's like, oh, they retain great market value. Like, yeah, but then you got to trade them. And A, they don't retain good market value typically over running backs at their cost. But B, like, then you have to trade them. And the hardest thing to do is to trade receivers that blend in with the position to somebody else. We talked about it earlier in that Mahomes discussion, and we talked about it earlier with the quarterbacks in Superflex. Those guys blend in, and all of a sudden, no one wants to pay for them, right? So that's the problem I have with a guy like Cooper Kupp, and sort of stockpiling those guys. That said, let's take the asset that I think is pretty productive and has been pretty productive on a per game basis and ride him, right? And that's kind of how I build my position. As I sort of self-evaluate, I am extremely, if we're doing stock market analogies, I am a buy and hold wide receiver guy, right? Because this formula doesn't tend to be a good one.
Yeah, ignore the market, and when
Right.
you get guys that are producing, the repeat factor is pretty strong, and we've seen the market erode, the flexibility erode. So yeah, you have to view different parts of your roster different ways. And if you have your first 3-4 wide receivers, and only one of them is sub 25 years old, and sort of some version of liquidity, so be it. You got to start 3+ of them every week in that format, and you're like, well, I got this. Let me spend my mental attention, elsewhere on my roster. I feel good here, and if that means you selectively add undervalued other guys, over the course of time, veterans or incoming rookies, whatever, that's how you sort of end up shape-shifting the position over time. It's not some instantaneous, well, I'm 27 plus all my entire depth chart, and this offseason I want to get to less sub 25. No, that's not. That's probably not the best strategy to optimize your results as a team. All right, this is actually a question I saw put out there, so I wanted us to do a quick rapid fire here. How would you rank these as dynasty stashes? Damian Harris, Gus Edwards, AJ Dillon, Devin Singletary, Kerryon Johnson.
It always feels weird.
Isn't it funny to call Harris a stash?
Yeah.
Week one starter.
It's always tough for me to rank. It's always interesting when you get what are nominally starters, right? What are on paper as starters in the NFL, and you sort of put them lower to the list. I think it's interesting because that's Singletary for me. Damian Harris, I think, is one. And I think Damian Harris is really, really closely correlated with Mac Jones, because when you look at what the New England Patriots offense did last year, it was so run heavy in the red zone, and it was so Cam Newton quarterback run heavy in the red zone that that's just not going to happen with Mac Jones. And so all of a sudden those snaps go elsewhere. And I think that Damian Harris in that scheme can be a huge beneficiary of that. So I think if we're seeing that Mac Jones is going to be the starter, we're getting sort of whiff of that. I think that that's a rocket ship up for Damian Harris. I also think that Sony Michel's potential cut candidate or a trade candidate. There's bad reports coming out of New England about him. So all of that said, I think there's a really strong trajectory there for him that I don't think he needs a ton of help to get to. After that, I think it'd be Dillon, and then Gus Edwards, and then Singletary and Kerryon Johnson. Yeah, I just do them exactly. I just rotated them in the order you read them to him.
You rotated them. Yeah. I think Harris and Dillon are easily the highest upside guys on the board and the most desirable. They might not necessarily be the two highest market value guys. Singletary might be higher than Dillon or something like that. I think then the next bucket would be Gus Edwards, probably from if Zach Moss is out and J.K. Dobbins is out, I don't know if Singletary has more upside than Edwards. If you're sort of monopolizing more, you're vaporizing to yourself more of that market share of that backfield. And Kerryon Johnson, he's looking around like, I don't even live in this neighborhood. I don't. What am I doing here? Let's be fair. I mean, in 2022/2023, he might not be in the NFL. Like, that is absolutely within the trajectory for Kerryon Johnson. I mean, and even if he is de facto the injury away guy, it's for carries, not really for receptions, I feel, with Philadelphia and behind Miles Sanders. So I have pretty tepid upside expectations for Kerryon Johnson, even if he gets that injury and Miles Sanders is out for a stretch. But I think all the others have some semblance of, you could see top 12, top 18 if certain things happen this year. And I do want to shout out, I was on the Dynasty newsletter earlier this week with Adam Wilde, and we talked about
on me.
I know, it was kind of weird, but fun conversation. We talked about the Patriots a lot, and I talked about that specific thing, which is Damian Harris is pretty affordable if you're under the expectation that for a decent cross section of the year, Mac Jones is a starter, because I think it unlocks a lot of upside for that backfield, and for the offense in general, because it's going to run completely differently with Mac Jones, and probably for the better in terms of other pieces and not maybe the quarterback centric. All right, we've got in Superflex, Joe Burrow is worth more than Calvin Ridley, and it isn't really close.
I guess it depends on what you're talking about. Worth is market value. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Projected production,
Actual value.
right?
Impact.
Impact. I mean, I think Ridley has a pretty. I had a subscriber reach out to me. He's like, I did some custom projections, and I really don't see a way Ridley's not in like the top 3. And I was like, well, I mean, it could certainly be a target funnel, right? I could sort of get that. Listen, until quarterbacks do it, like they're an underdog to do it. And people want to sort of, and when do it for an entire season, and then do it again, and then we can talk about them being guys. That's what makes Burrow over Russell Wilson so laughable, right? That's what makes Trevor Lawrence over Russell Wilson so laughable. Heck, we could even use Matthew Stafford in that conversation. Those. It's just it's comical to me. And so yeah, I mean, in terms of if I wanted someone that's going to be on a difference maker on my dynasty team, it's probably Ridley. That said, I'm not going to trade Burrow for Ridley straight up.
Yep. All right, we got 2 more here. 118. Who's counting this? 118 wide receivers put up a top 24 a week last year.
I've heard that stat. Yeah. I mean, good luck predicting it.
Yeah. Is this best ball? Because that's a big key there. Good luck. Like sharpshooting. I don't know if you've ever looked. I mean, we're the wrong audience for this self question, but like if you sat there like with some of these rosters we see with 10 wide receivers on your roster, and let's say you got a couple auto starts, but are you really sharpshooting the other 2 guys that are going to have better performances of the rest, the field? You're like good luck,
right?
This collection, this hodgepodge of wide receiver 2s and 3s in the NFL pecking orders. Oh my God, who's going to go 3 catches for 110 and a touchdown? Good luck.
Great.
Good luck trying to predict that one. Or who's going to even get more than 5, 6, 7 targets? And they still might go 5 for 53 and no touchdown. So you missed that one. Okay.
This is the Kiki QT problem. I mean, this is right. Kiki QT from
the aggregator, the captain aggregator, right? Where it's like, oh, we had 2 good weeks. All right. Well, can I ask in August which those are going to be? Because that would really be helpful for my lineup setting. All right, last one. Once you make a pick for a player, the pick you used is irrelevant. And I think they're referencing like for future trade discussions and sort of how the market at any point in time in the future will pay for that player, trade market, etc.
Sunk cost, right? I mean, isn't that the?
Well, it affects dynasty GMs, right? Like so-and-so can't cut a player because they spent 210 on them, even though everything in their being says, yeah, I should really pick this player up or trade him for X.
Right.
They won't do it.
This is a sunk cost problem. This is just a psychological phenomenon that we have a hard time dissociating what we paid for something with what we'll sell it for. So that's that's not uncommon. I will say, go adopt an orphan team, and all of a sudden you'll be a lot better at this problem because you can understand. You
have no sunken cost. You're just walking into a black and white list of players,
and get one that's really bad. Like you pick one that's really bad, and you'll be like, all right.
So no one's actually worth anything. Yeah,
right.
You're like, wow, that's easy.
You're like, what's everybody? Your favorite gift there, the dog in the fire. He's like, everything. I'm fine.
Everything's fine.
That's fine. I'm burning. The orphan you want to walk into.
I'm burning and smiling. I don't know the difference. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Do you recall like what was your biggest like actual hands-on lesson for this? Like, did you have a player that I always go back to Jeff Janis where it's like my sunken cost was like just emotional. It was like a 4th round rookie pick. But do you recall like there was like everything in you said that such and such you drafted a guy at 206 or 110 or 304 or whatever it was, and you were just like you held on to them too long, and it was based on the sunken cost?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue that with Dylan, but I didn't really, the reason I didn't sell him wasn't sunken cost. It was I thought he wasn't. I thought his value was going to go up more than it did, or stay higher than for a longer time than it did. Maybe Stafford. I guess you could argue that with Stafford in the Detroit days. That would probably be one. I think those are the 2 big ones of recent note that come to mind.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you really have to assess, how you're using, especially third, fourth round picks, because I think there's some trigger for people that if you use a rookie pick at all, you have to have some allegiance or like, man, I was buying them for their progression into year 2. Well, fourth round rookie picks might not survive on typical depths, all the way if they're not on a taxi to year 2. So just be careful with how you utilize that, because you might want to dump them by week 1. If they didn't make the 53, or they're not, they're running back 3 or wide receiver 6 or whatever. And if that's the case, like if you're playing that out, and you're like, if that happens, I'm dumping them, then just trade the pick. Punt the 411 for a fourth next year that's going to be higher than maybe next year it's 403, and you can trade that for a third. Like, you see where I'm going with this. I mean, eventually it becomes a relevant player. You just got to play, as you would say, you got to play the long game. With that pick, and you do that across your leagues, you do that with a bunch of different, and I think it does make a tangible difference. All right, that's going to do it. Big time show here. Want to remind you to sign up for that Football Guys premium membership. And I wanted to shout out some of the new content this week. We've got Simeon Bloom's Best Ball series underway. Stephon Diggs, is he a top 3 wide receiver option? That's by Pat Fitzmaurice. And then Jordan, you finished out your series about cut candidates, contracts to watch across the skill positions, correct?
Yeah, I did all the skill position contracts: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Okay. 3 of them were featured on the left side of Football Guys today. So I said, "Whoa!" I said,
boom, there you go.
Feels, hey, I am somebody. I do exist.
I'm somebody now. Navin R. Johnson. Give us a little nugget from just one player that either stuck out to you, the more analysis you did, you're like, this is interesting in terms of the ripple effects, or about that player specifically that maybe a lot of Dynasty GMs aren't tracking.
Oh boy, I was going to go position, but now you're asking player. I think the fallout from Rodgers is really interesting, because there's going to be cap consequences. If he's traded to the new team, so how does that all work? And I think there's follow-on consequences with Devontae Adams, because Devontae Adams is a 2022 free agent. I think the other thing to really watch is the 2022 tight end class is really interesting, because the Ingram, Joku, OJ Howard class is up, as well as some other, as well as the second round guys from the year after that, which is pretty good class. So there's a bunch of free agents next year in tight end class. I think it's going to be really interesting for teams like Buffalo in terms of how they want to go about building the position.
Yep. And a reminder that Football Guys premium subscription, and that's just some of the content from this past week. And it's going to start, this is going to be an avalanche later July into August. We call it the red zone, and it's going to get hot in that red zone. It's going to be the
bombs away, baby.
Yeah. Everything's on fire. We're going to have you ready for week 1. And I've mentioned it before, but it saves you time. You sync your leagues, you get all the week by week advice, and just the organization of advice and information is going to be the thing that makes managing your teams a whole lot easier with that premium subscription at footballguys.com. So in this episode, we discussed a little more about team building, fixated a little bit on George Kittle in the trade market, as well as Mark Andrews, Odell Beckham, his profile, Patrick Mahomes, and of course, the new minted, we'll bring it back from time to time, word association game for Dynasty players there. We started out with Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, Cole Kmet, and Evan Ingram, talking about some potential free agents in 2022 with pedigreed tight ends there. So until next time, I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara, and good luck in your Dynasty leagues.